Buddy, happy Halloween and happy Tuesday. It's another of good natured with tech support puppy, who, by the way, was no help at all with our technology this evening. I had to reboot my computer, and he like he was going to lend emotional support as opposed to technology support. Well, how y'all doing? It's been a couple of weeks since we got together, and we've kind of seen, at least locally here, we've seen our weather go from beautiful fall to a little bit of a chill in the air. The snow, in fact, there was just a little dusting of snow just now when I let these guys out, thinking that maybe if they went outside and ran around a little bit, they would lay quietly, which maybe they're going to do now. Anyway, I've got one little show and tell item here that I wanted to share before we get into the last couple of weeks of nature photos. And it has to do with these items here. I picked these up and took them home. Now that I'm thinking about it, I probably shouldn't have. These were at Johnson's Mound Forest Preserve. And they were described to me as butternuts, but I think they are just quirky black walnuts. Butternuts, the elusive white walnut that I still have not been able to track down. White walnuts and black walnuts, they are the same genus, Euglins, but different species. And black walnuts usually don't have this little knob. This almost looks, like citrus, like a lemon or lime, something. It does have a vaguely oblong shape, but white walnuts, from what I've been told, have a distinctly oval shape to them. This is pretty much round with just this little projection here on one end. They also smell very much like black walnuts. Now, I've never been lucky enough to smell the husk of a white walnut, but black walnuts, it is almost a citrus smell that they have. These are they're quite light. I think they have dried out beyond what would be considered edible. It may be why there were so many on the ground. And by the way, this wasn't in the preserve proper. It was it's a tree that grows by the house that's along Hughes Road. So again, if you're local, you might be able to picture that. So maybe I wasn't, taking items from a forest preserve proper. But anyway, there was this momentary high when someone said, "Hey, let's go look at those the butternuts that are growing." And I'm like, "Oh my gosh, are you kidding me? I've been looking for this tree for years." And this is what we ended up with. And again, I think it's just a variation on the black walnut. I don't know if we have a subspecies in this area and I don't know if this would be enough to, qualify as a variation, a subspecies or not. But such are the ups and downs of life out in nature, looking for something so specific and then finding something that was close, but was no cigar. All right, I'm going to put these somewhere where the munchkins here won't bother them. And let's go ahead and get started. Like I said, we got a couple of weeks worth of nature news to cover. And I've also got to go back through 2 weeks of brain cells to remember how we do our screen shares here. Always a challenge. You'd think in 3 years' time I would have this down without a problem. There's always that moment of uncertainty. There we go. Oh, with the requisite St. Charles Park District commercial, stcparks.org. I should talk to our tech guy. I don't know. I know they did this This was an addition since we've been using Zoom, but I'm wondering if we could have them switch it to stcnature.org, which is the home of the Park District's Naturalist Department. I have to talk to them about that. Anyway, I'm going to click out of this. We're going to go over here to our screen, share our slides from these past couple of weeks. And what in the world are we looking at here, huh? Well, there's a chair leg, but if we look at the bottom of the chair, and actually what catches your eye next is this white thing, right? Well, that's what caught my eye. I was giving a talk for the, let's see, this would be the Golden Cays, the Kiwanis group over at St. John Newman's Church on the east side here at St. Charles. And as I was setting up to do our presentation there, little motion caught my eye, and this white thing was moving rapidly across the ground while it was being dragged by this creature in front of it, which you can see is just a blur of moving legs. This is one of my favorite indoor creatures, known to give a lot of folks the heebie-jeebies. It is the house centipede. It's not a native species. This is a creature that's traveled around the world, probably because it likes to hide out in dark places. So as people packed their things and moved along overseas, came from Europe to North America, these guys came along with them and have a pretty firm hold here and lots of other places around the world. Some people call them thousand-leggers. They move, and the way they move those long legs, they really look like they're flying along. The motion kind of ripples along as they move, and they are bona fide centipedes. They actually have venom. Their first two legs up here, I can't really see too well here, but they are adapted into fangs, so they can inject venom into their prey. These are one of the good guys. These are insects that will help eat, I'm sorry, not insects. These are arthropods that will help eat insects and other creatures that you might not want to have. Things like cockroaches, things like silverfish, the other things that like to hang out in dark places. These guys will take care of them for you. And I think this one was caught a little unawares. The Golden Cays meet in the morning. And I suspect the room prior to their arrival had been dark. And the centipede was just trying to unobtrusively make its way back to someplace dark. Whoops, don't close your eyes. We'll get to that in a second. That white thing. So what had originally caught my eye was the centipede must have rippled its way through a spider web, or an old spider web, and then it picked up a piece of paper. So that it was like it had this little streamer trailing behind it as it ran across the room. By this point, we had disentangled that the spider web from it, and right after this, it scurried away and disappeared to go about its important work out of the sight of humans. But if you've got a basement, a space, a dark, they like a moist environment to it. It doesn't have to be, dank or dripping wet, but well, as with all of our indoor arthropods, dryness, especially as we're going into winter, dryness kills a lot of our indoor friends. It's actually kind of hard to maintain creatures like this in a dry environment. If you don't have any humidification, if you don't have a humidifier in your home in winter, the air can become quite dry. And not just your centipedes, but your spiders, lots of creatures have trouble surviving. And if you keep insects, it can be really hard to keep the humidity high enough to keep them happy. But anyway, this was a fun little addition to the nature program for the Golden Cays. the other day. And now this, yes, people do leave trash, frustratingly large amounts of trash in our parks. And I thought I was doing a good job by picking up these cans. And then I realized that they were fresh enough, freshly discarded enough that they still had sweet liquid in them. And these ants, which I think are a form of small woodland carpenter ant, they were attracted to that sugar. Well, I picked these up. This was at I was at Hickory Knolls the other day in the natural area off of a portion that we call Archery Road. And I thought I was just, going to pick up cans and recycle them. Well, I'd walked, I don't know, maybe a half a mile or so carrying these things. And then I realized that they had ants in them. And I had this sort of, what would you call it? A moral dilemma. I started feeling really bad for the ants. Ants, they are colony creatures. They don't really survive very well on their own. These were sent out on a mission to find food, and they'd found some, but they weren't going to be able to find their way back. If I were to just shake these cans and let these ants go where they are, you can see in the background here, I'd actually gone over to watch and listen to the Canada geese. We're in the midst of our fall migration. We have a lot of Canada geese that are arriving from points north, and the flocks are growing daily. So there's a big joyful sound of geese honking in the I don't know if you call it a large pond or a small lake over on the St. Charles Boys Home property, now the Illinois Youth Corrections property, hence the fence. And there's also razor wire up at the top of it. So I was quite a distance from where I had picked these ants up at, or these cans up at. Anyway, I walked back over and I was trying to get the ants to leave the can so I could let them go back to their home and I could recycle. Long story short, I ended up leaving the cans with the ants so that they could finish their job of foraging. And that's now on my to-do list for later this week to go and get those cans from the side of the trail. Yeah, it's hard. It's hard to on the one hand, do good by recycling, and then also keep in mind any lives that you might be impacting because of it. So anyway, just a word to you guys. Maybe if you find cans like this, give them a good shake before you leave the area. Or if you want to get your steps in, I probably added another, 3,000 steps or so to my little route that day by taking those ants back to where they belong. Now we're going to stay with bugs here for the next few slides. This was one stink bug that I had an encounter with. This was actually in the van that I was driving. And I looked at it, and whenever we see stink bugs these days, where does your brain go, right? To brown marmorated stink bug, the introduced species. But we do have a lot of stink bugs that are native. This one I don't think was a brown marmorated stink bug. I then saw another similar one. This was a few days later out at Hickory Knolls. The reason I don't think that they are the introduced one, their antennae don't have bands on them. I've tried to get different angles, and I always tried to put these against a light colored background. There's no light colored banding on these antennae. I did a little bit of reading about different stink bugs in the area. I don't think these are predatory stink bugs. A lot of those have spines here at the shoulders. It comes to an even sharper point than these bugs do. There is one It's actually called the one-spotted stink bug. I don't know for sure if that's the case, but I was reading about how you needed to turn a stink bug over to make the diagnosis with some of these natives. So I flipped this one over. It's kind of cool. You put them on their back and they immediately start to flip themselves over. It looks like they're doing the backstroke. If we zoom in here, we can see this one spot down here, which I think is diagnostic, because there is also a two-spotted stink bug that has two spots there. So I put question marks by this because I'm not 100% sure on that ID. But I know it's not the introduced species. Here we got a nice view too. These are insects. If they're predatory stink bugs, they will stick this piercing and sucking mouth part here into another insect. In this case, though, I think these guys feed on plant juices. So that mouth part, which is, always makes me think of the straw on a juice box. You pierce the membrane on that, slurp the juice out. That's how these mouth parts work here. They keep it folded down here along underneath the head. And then they insert it as needed on what they're feeding on. Now here, so this is a brown marmorated stink bug. And here are those banded antennae that I was mentioning before. A little more pattern here around the sides as well. And these guys, these are husky bugs. What jumped out at me too with these other insects is they're relatively small size in comparison. I didn't put them up on a lip balm or anything. You can kind of see here on my thumbnail, they're just not terribly large. Or they're certainly smaller than what we're used to seeing with the marmorated stink bugs, which yes, are coming in the house. I had one around here the other day. They tend to congregate. Remember, we were talking about humidity. And you get stink bugs in the house. So a lot of times, if you give them a chance, they'll migrate to a sink, some place where there's some moisture so that they can try and prevent themselves from being dried out. Also, woolly bear season. This one was soaking up some rays. Also at Hickory Knolls, this was adjacent to the garage where we store the equipment for the natural area. This one had quite a large brown band, and I know that the folklore has been disproven, but there's been a lot of talk about how we are in for a warmer than normal winter. At least that's what I've heard. And the large brown band on this woolly bear would seem to confirm it. Now, this is a caterpillar. We actually have several fuzzy caterpillars. There's the all black caterpillar, which is the larva of the giant leopard moth. And those guys, leopard moths, this actually turns into a Isabella tiger moth. We've got a few other tiger moths that live in this area too. These fuzzy caterpillars, they are not going to make cocoons at this time of year. I don't know, a few weeks back when we got together, we were talking about the polyphemus moth and how that's a big green caterpillar. It spins a cocoon of silk and leaves, and it spends its winter in the leaf litter. In fact, that one that we talked about, it's actually out. I have it in a mason jar out on inside my outdoor grill. So it's somewhat protected, but it's also experiencing these cold temperatures, which it's going to need in order to stay in its diapause or its resting stage through but these guys, they're not going to make a cocoon yet. They are going to nestle down in leaf litter, sheltered, protected places. They will spend the winter as caterpillars. When they come out in the spring, they'll resume what they did before. They are what they call polyphagous. That means they eat a lot of different things. So lots of um, just, lawn types of plants. Then they will uh, create their cocoon as we get into the warmer part of spring, and then they emerge in late spring and early summer as the adult Isabella tiger moth. See what I'm doing here. All right, let's go on to the next one. So Diane, I have to thank you for not this picture, but the next one. The cyanide millipedes are out doing their thing, but Diane had taken this cool picture of with a ruler, no less, of a cyanide millipede. Pluraloma, I believe, is the Pluraloma flavipes, I think, is the species that we're looking at here. That seems to be what occurs in this area. There's a lot of these cyanide millipedes, though, that look kind of similar. If we zoom in, let's see, I can zoom in here. Yeah, see, this isn't a very clear picture. They've got sort of, well, they've got these, the pattern is variable, but these yellow, you know how we've got traffic signs, yellow triangle traffic signs that mean, warning or caution. Same thing with these millipedes. That coloration is there as a warning because, yes, they do produce a cyanide type chemical as a defense. They and in doing so, they actually end up smelling really good. They smell like amaretto. Should you hold one in your hands? Some people have been known to have reactions when that chemical is released, so you want to handle them a little carefully. However, millipedes, they're not like centipedes. I think let's go back one more time here. That centipedes have one pair of legs per body segment. So that little centipede that was running around over at the church, really long legs, but only one pair per body segment. But here we can see the millipedes, they have two pairs on each body segment. And they also, they don't have fangs. They don't possess venom. They're more in the detritivore. They feed on a lot of, they recycle a lot of things down there on the forest floor. Now, Diane's picture here, we see there's not just the millipede, but there's millipede parts here. And what I think might have happened here, it might just be a crazy coincidence that one millipede molted and then another one came along, but I kind of wonder if this one had cast its skin. They, as arthropods, they have to molt in order to be able to grow. And I kind of think maybe this one had molted a while back. I think they are like other pods in that when they molt or they shed their skin, that their body remains light colored for a while until that exoskeleton hardens up. This one has gotten its normal coloration, so I'm kind of thinking maybe it had molted and then just kind of hung out in the area for a little while. And that hardening off process is pretty critical to their survival. If they start moving around before their skin is the new exoskeleton is fully hardened up, they can be quite vulnerable to getting squished or eaten. The defensive chemical might help them avoid one, but not the other. They are very, very soft when that skin first comes off. But I'd found an article that was looking at millipedes and the shedding process they go through and how they actually they will consume part of their exoskeleton to retrieve some of the nutrients that they had left behind in there. So that could explain why this was in pieces here as well. But Diane, I appreciate you sharing that picture and giving us the opportunity to learn a little bit more about these super cool little critters. They're not, before we move on, I'll toss out one more thing. They are a native millipede. The smaller millipedes that we tend to find, I know a lot of us are bringing our plants in for the winter. We'll see smaller, maybe inch to maybe inch and a quarter length, very narrow and uniform color millipedes. Those are, there's a blanket term, greenhouse millipedes. A lot of those are more of our cosmopolitan species, ones like the house centipede that have moved around the world as people have moved around the world. This one, though, which I think it's Pluraloma flavipes, and they are very much a native species and a cool part of our forest ecology here in northeastern Illinois. And this was again at Johnson's Mound, and I now, you know, I'm going to try and remember to do this again next year. I'm guessing this is an annual phenomenon, but a lot of our spring, the spring ephemerals, the wildflowers that we so much look forward to in April and May, signaling that winter is over, they're putting out a lot of new growth right now. Here's some Jacob's ladder coming up. Here's some Virginia waterleaf. It wasn't all the spring ephemerals. There was, gosh, I don't think I took a picture of it. There was some oh gosh, I'm drawing a blank on the name. The oh man, there's just a big blank. Sharp-lobed and round-lobed hepatica. Thank you. Boy, that was painful. Yeah, so the hepatica was putting out green growth, the waterleaf, the Jacob's ladder, but then like like our Solomon seal, the berries are hanging off, but there was no new growth at the bottom of those. I was looking for things like toothwort, and it wasn't all the ephemerals, it's only some of them. And I just thought it was kind of a cool thing. We actually talked about maybe doing a spring wildflower walk in the fall to see how many species we could identify without their blooms. And this was another thing, our friend Terry pointed this out. You know, usually in fall, the poison ivy gets a really attractive red color, but by and large this year, the poison ivy is yellow. And I guess it has to do with certainly the pigments that are present in the leaf, and maybe the whatever ability it had to produce when it was photosynthesizing this year, maybe the sugars that it would normally produce were in a different ratio. We had a weird growing season. We had a lot of drought early on, a lot of lack of rain, very dry conditions early on, and then we'd have some moisture, and then it would dry up again, and then we had a pretty good dose of precipitation as we got into later part of the growing season. But maybe that influenced it, I don't know, but it was just kind of interesting. And it's not just again, this was Johnson's Mound, but I've noticed it elsewhere. I did find one little plant that was displaying the more typical poison ivy red that we would expect to see at this time of year. But by and large, poison ivy is yellow this year. Leaves of 3, let it be, unless it's a wafer ash. This plant, so this is I guess you'd call it a small tree or large shrub. It doesn't grow everywhere, but where it grows, you'll usually see thick stands of it. I took this picture along the Fox River Trail down in Batavia on the west side of the river. There's a good stand of it just a little bit south of Fabian Forest Preserve. There's a couple of stands of wafer ash over at Leroy Oaks Forest Preserve. And then this was out at Hoover Wood. I'm sorry, Hoover Forest Preserve. Hoover Woods is a school in Batavia. Hoover Forest Preserve is a forest preserve in Kendall County. And this is a illustration of how wafer ash gets its name. It gets these, it's not an ash, but it is these are the quote unquote wafers with the seeds here in the middle. This is a plant I always like to check. I spent a lot of time during our summer nature camps when we meet at Leroy Oaks for our creek day. I always check the wafer ash because it is a food plant for the giant swallowtail butterfly. The caterpillars feed. This is one of their food plants. But don't these leaves, if you wouldn't, if you don't follow them back to their source, they look an awful lot like poison ivy, don't they? Kind of cool. Hoover, so shameless plug, and we'll probably mention this a time or two more before the day actually gets here, but for, oh gosh, at this point, decades, Kendall County has hosted a New Year's Day hike. This goes back, I remember the first one I went to, I was still working at the Fox Valley Park District, and we had a gentleman who he did some programming at Blackberry Farm, but he was also deeply involved in scouting, and he was big into iron pot cooking. He would bring out all his iron, I call them cauldrons, these gigantic kettles, and they would do the scout tradition of everybody brings a can of soup. They pour all the soups into the big pot. The soup would heat up. They'd throw a bunch of hot dogs in there too. The meal would cook while we would be out walking, and then you come back, you'd have your cup of soup with hot dog in it. It's kind of a fun tradition. Well, it's still going on today. I think back in the day, Dick Young, our famous, one of the kind of the founding fathers of nature preservation here in Kane and Kendall counties, he used to participate in those hikes. So it's a nice nod to him, as well as many other conservationists in the area, that walk is still going on. I'm going to be leading one of those walks on New Year's Day. So if you're not doing anything, you're in the area, you'd like to come along, should be a good time. Can't guarantee wafer ash will still be, the leaves will be long gone. Maybe some of the seeds will still be there. Hoover's a really cool spot right on the Fox River, a little bit west of downtown Yorkville. Like, we'll talk about it again before the day actually gets here. But if you're not doing anything, might want to come out on New Year's morning for that annual hike. I apologize. I was thinking that I would have time to identify this. This is another, actually one of several cool fungi that are showing themselves now that we are into fall and have had some rain. This is one view. Here's a close-up view. So it's some sort of a shelf fungus, and it's got these nice pores underneath. The overall effect of this, the top of it, I swear it looked like brown velvet. Just really, really nicely. I believe this was growing on a sugar maple. Really pretty, almost looks like, it grew some kind of a frilly collar there, doesn't it? Another cool fungus, did not get a chance to identify it yet. This one, though, was on the same log, just farther down. This is called wolf's milk. which it's the neat thing about fungi are one of many, many cool things. So they're all working to, help decompose what's going on, on the, usually it's wood, but it's not always on wood that they grow. When you see the what we call the mushroom on the top, the fruiting body, that's indicative of another part of the organism that's operating out of our sight. And that's where the actual decomposition is going on. This is the reproductive part of the organism that we're seeing, putting spores out and helping perpetuate the species. This is another one. This caught my eye. This was growing out of some mulch. I think I was up at Primrose Farm. I think these are old inky caps. There's one view, and here's another view. We're going from species that are not edible. Inky caps, there's actually if you can pick them before they get inky and they go before they get mushy and yucky, they are supposed to be edible. I don't know that I would want to go there. In fact, this is one, if you guys have been tuning in since we started doing these good natured hours, that every fall I rave about hen of the woods, and this was a monster hen of the woods. I think this one has to be about the size of a basketball. This was growing in the Hickory Knolls natural area. Here's one with the 2 5/8 inch lip balm, just to give you an idea of the size of it. I did sample just a little bit. I didn't eat it because you never want to eat a mushroom in the field. You always want to take it home, clean it up, and cook it before you try it. I have always enjoyed hen of the woods. This time didn't sit too well. Didn't get sick from it, but I honestly didn't feel good. And stubborn me, I could not admit that my favorite fall mushroom was making me feel crummy. So I kept trying it over the course of, I would say, I don't know, 4 or 5 days. I'd cook the piece that I brought home, and seasoned it and everything, and I take it. And sure enough, about an hour or so later, I just my stomach just kind of hurt. It's kind of burned. The only thing I can think of that might be influencing my now intolerance to this delicious mushroom is I had my gallbladder out in March, and so I don't know if that affects how my digestive system processes these. I don't know. So eating aside, it's still a really cool mushroom, and this is one that tends to recur in the same spot year after year. Some mushrooms, I know, in springtime, you find a spot that has morels, and then you go back the following year and they're not there. The rest of the hen of the woods organism is pretty well entrenched in the roots. They tend to grow around oak trees, and then they just come back year after year after year. So this is hen of the woods. This is chicken of the woods. And this cracked me up. This was from a reader. And he said, what the heck is this thing? It just kind of popped up in his yard. What I thought was interesting was chicken of the woods, like hen of the woods, they want to be growing on wood, and there's different types. There's one that grows on conifers. There's another that grows on hardwoods, but they all have this orange coloration with the yellowish edges on the mushroom. I always use a lip balm, but this guy uses beer. I'm gonna have to maybe change my thing, because I think that's kind of a a cool way to gauge the size. And it also gives you an idea of just how large that mushroom really is. I asked the gentleman, I said, is there any chance, because this looks like it just sort of popped out of the creeping Charlie. I said, this is a species that usually attaches itself to some sort of a dead or dying tree. And he said that out of range of this photo, there is a willow tree, and he suspects the roots come out this far, and that this mushroom must be growing on the roots of the willow tree. But it is a season for both hen of the woods, which gets its name. This isn't a real good angle to show it from, but the way these different layers come off of the central part of the mushroom, it's supposed to look like the fluffy feathers on the underside of a hen. And chicken of the woods, my understanding is that it gets its name because it does taste a lot like chicken. The texture even is supposed to be very similar to white meat chicken, the chicken breast. So two relatively common fall mushrooms, part of the many types of fungus that we're seeing at this time of the year. Now this, I'm going to see if I'll get this to play or not. This is also, yeah, here we go. When was the last time you heard these sounds, huh? And it was also along the Fox River Trail. Let's see red-winged blackbirds. It was deafening underneath these trees. Couldn't see. I looked and I looked, and I know they were up there. They were hard to see. I did eventually see a couple, but this is so. I mentioned our Canada geese earlier. They're flocking. We've got incoming flocks from the north coming in. The red-winged blackbirds, are grackles, are cowbirds. There's a lot of blackbird species that are flocking together, and they can be quite noisy as they go for what remains of our tremendous mast crop this year. They're up there in the trees. There was the bits of tree were falling as we were walking underneath these trees too. So lots of noise, lots of feeding activity as those flocks come together. They will move a short distance south, and then the redwings are one of our first birds to return as we get towards the end of winter in February. They'll start coming back and claiming their territories for the breeding season that will start shortly after that. Now this bird, I'm gonna be the first to admit this is not a great picture, but this was a little bird that I had so much fun watching. This is in the Fox River. This is one of those, now you see them, now you don't, kind of bird. So it's a diving duck. I'm pretty sure this is a pied-billed grebe. It was very small, and they tend to be pretty solitary if they're not breeding. If they don't have young with them, they don't really tend to make hang out in flocks. But it must have been finding a lot to feed around this submerged branch, because it would pop up every once in a while, and then it would go back down again. I must have watched it for 10 minutes or so, just in this small area right here. So keep an eye out for them too. This is an example of a bird that you don't always have to see the markings. If you can see that distinctive behavior and you get a sense of its size, there's really not any other birds that are small, solitary, and diving like that. The pied-billed grebe. And then these guys, again, crummy picture, but I saw them 2 days in a row. These are a bunch of young cormorants, and I swear they were standing there let's see, I saw them Friday, and the weather kind of started to take a nosedive towards the end of the day. And then Saturday turned out to be not such a bad day, but it was certainly cooler. And these guys, I swear they were sitting there like waiting for, some kind of instinct to kick in. There were no adults around. Hopefully they figure out that it is time to start packing up and heading south. But the adult cormorants are a black bird. The immatures have this much lighter color to them. These one that was in the water and this one that's facing there, I had to take this picture to make sure it was a cormorant. They were so much lighter than what we expect those birds to look like. I thought, well, maybe there's some other kind of duck hanging out with these cormorants. But distinctive postures. Look how far back on their body their legs sit. This is all immature double-crested cormorants. Oh shoot, I was going to add another picture and I forgot. This was a cool thing that happened at Hickory Knolls, and I include this so that you can use this as a means of identifying a spider egg case. So different types of spiders make different shaped egg sacs. This is what a bold jumping spider produces. This thing was, I would say, the size of a $50 or a silver dollar. And the eggs, so this Hickory Knolls, someone over the summer captured a bold jumping spider. Those are our biggest jumping spiders in this area. They're the black jumpers with a variation on either a white pattern or sometimes orange pattern on their back. They have green on their chelicerae or their mouth parts, kind of an iridescent green color. Well, they had put her on display. This little critter keeper named her Jane Jumper, keeping with our tradition of alliterative names. And she created this egg sac up in the corner, and they all hatched. It's hard to see them. The enclosure that she's in, the rest of the cage there has a lot of dried leaves and a little log. I believe the staff is now going to get some flightless fruit flies, so that once the jumpers, the first round of feeding, the siblings kind of eat each other, and then from there they start branching out and feeding on bigger game like fruit flies. But this was a little blessed event, and I apologize, I was going to put in a picture. I don't have a picture of Jane, but I have another bold jumping spider picture I was going to show you. But this, if you see a structure like this, that's who made it, was a bold jumping spider. And then this, as I was leaving Hickory Knolls, this kind of, there's a lot of activity here that it was in kind of a weird place. This is the sidewalk leading out to the parking lot. And if we look in here, is there a good view? Oh yeah, here you can see, and here you can see two toes. There's a lot of deer that were walking through here. And I thought, what's the attraction? What has changed? Well, over the summer, we had new parking lot lights added to the circle drive, and they had to put, there was quite a bit of disruption as they were, our crews were putting lines in to erect these new poles. So humans made the path, but then the deer decided to take advantage of it. So this has kind of become a little thoroughfare here out in front of the building, to get to all the tender plants that are growing here in the rain gardens that we have out front. Those two green areas in front of Hickory Knolls are they're really catch basins. the building, which is over here, is designed to have water roll off the roof, fall down in a, I believe the architects called a cascade in their narrative. So it rolls off the front of the roof, goes down, and there's a drain here that then allows the water to flow into first this area, and then there is an additional drain that takes it underneath the sidewalk to this other side here. So there's two basins to manage the water that flows off of the roof. Makes for some good growing conditions, and apparently makes for nice salads for our deer too. It'll be neat to see, interesting to see whether they continue to use it, if this becomes a bona fide game trail, which we don't usually see right there in front of the building because of the parking lot and everything that's there. It's not really a natural area, but nature seems to have found it. Oh, and then this, I got this as a text message this morning. This is actually right behind Hickory. And yes, it's a mink. My first concern was, oh my goodness, is someone poisoning rodents? Are we seeing some trickle down toxins in our food chain? But the person who found it said that its belly was torn open, and I'm wondering if maybe an owl grabbed it. We did have an owl hunting around the building a couple of years ago, and we found 2 mink that it had caught and torn apart. So I'm sort of thinking that's what happened, but it is a mink, and we can tell it's a mink by this little bit of white underneath the chin. There's no reference for size here, but it was described as being about just under 2 feet long. So that's pretty big for a weasel. And that little bit of white there under the chin lets us know that it was a mink. Maybe it was headed from the wetlands that are behind the building and heading to the rain gardens that are in front of the building. We do see a fair amount of mink in that area, but now there's one less. And then I threw these in, very appropriate for Halloween. We were visited by a bat. This was our education staff. They happened to look up into the sumacs that are along the Andrini Trail behind the Nature Center. This is a little red bat. Now the lighting makes it look dark brown, but this is a bat. You can see the white here that they display on their underside. They took a few pictures of it. These are bats that are solitary by nature. They're not the kind that would form a colony in an attic or a barn. These are bats that tend to live by themselves and camouflage nicely by hanging like a dead leaf up in a tree, or in this case in these sumac here. But they're a bat that lives here in the summer. They breed here, and then they leave come fall. And I know they go south, but I don't know exactly where it is that they go. Keep an eye. Now with this cold snap, I'm hoping they are far enough away that they can, that they'll be, ahead of this cold. Bats as insectivores, they have to hibernate because there's no food for them. Our colony forming bats, like our big brown bats, they stick around here. Sometimes they will hibernate, sometimes in the same place where they live in the summertime. They just stay there all year round. Other bats, though, like these solitary bats, they do fly south. Now, this, just to wrap up, I thought you guys would get a kick out of this. When we met a few weeks ago, we were preparing to go down to WGN, and I was showing you the different visual aids we were coming up with. These were the what was left of a plastic beetle and a plastic cicada that we adapted. I think we turned the beetle into a tortoise beetle larva, and we turned the cicada into a spittle bug. Well, I had these pieces sitting on my desk, and every time I saw them, it looked like a plastic praying mantis had come along and torn the legs and the wings off of their prey, which is what real praying mantises do in real life. This was a scene from this summer. Might have been a praying mantis. It could also have been a bird, but they will pluck the inedible or the undigestible parts off of their prey before they eat it. This was a Luna moth that was eaten. This was over at Dick Young Forest Preserve, but it's kind of made me laugh. It had me thinking that there were plastic predators on my desk. Anyway, a little weird nature humor. Let's stop the talk, the slides here. We got a few chats before we wrap things up this evening. Centipedes are known as 100-leggers. Okay. Millipedes are known. Good point, Jerry. Yeah, I always think of those centipedes as the things that make people scream too. I think I remember hearing squeals at Potawatomi. I remember my college apartment had them too, and my roommates hated them. So thanks for that clarification. Centi means 100, milli means 1,000. Woolly bears. Christmas, you could do what they are. If you want to keep it, just make sure you give it plenty of moisture. You know, as kids, I think we always, whatever creature, insect we caught and put in a jar, we'd always pluck grass to put in there, whether we thought it was food, or, you know, we're gonna have to put grass in there too. And I did that. I know I did it with lightning bugs. I did it with caterpillars. Putting grass and leaves, and there would be important. The grass will actually help contribute moisture. Again, humidity is so important, but you do want to make sure you keep it cool. You don't want it to try and start, moving around and feeding at a time of year when it needs to be resting. And Diane, doing your fungus monitoring, bless your heart. I'm glad that ruler it came in handy. Yeah, made for some great photos. Any action with skunk cabbage? Meredith, it's got a little bit of growth on it too. And I remember last year when I went out looking for skunk cabbage seeds, that's what I kept seeing, were these little, it almost looked like green fingers. It looked like the start of the hood that was going to be coming up in the springtime. But I don't know how much farther that will come up, but I don't know that it is proceeded beyond that. Didn't see it. I didn't get back to Pearson Creek Fen this past week. That's the place I always check for that. So, and I don't know. I did want to get back there too to see if the seeds that we found there had dispersed. That's still on the to-do list. Now they're probably covered with a little bit of snow. Oh, honey mushrooms. Yeah, honey mushrooms, I would have trouble identifying those, Wallace, just because no one's ever really showed them to me. The closest I came to identifying or seeing honey mushrooms, and I think we did talk about them, this would have been, I think, 2 years ago. There is another mushroom that will overtake. It's called I've seen it called the aborted entoloma and the abortive entoloma, but the entoloma mushroom actually engulfs the honey mushroom, and it turns into mushroom is known. The common name is another common name is shrimp of the woods, which is edible too. But you need the honey mushroom for the other mushroom to take over, the entoloma to take over. But it's interesting that so the foragers, there's a lot. I think there's a lot of foraging going on that morels get all the publicity or all the attention, but there's a lot of fall fungus hunters out there as well. Yeah. Well, and I heard that a couple people who, so the Forest Preserve District, King County started a fungus monitoring program. Is it now 2 years old? And I've heard that there's some people that are getting ready. I know they put a cap on new monitors. But I heard that there's some people who are going to stop monitoring. So there might be some opportunity in the future to go to a training and become a fungus monitor. If that's something that you might be thinking about doing. And Phil saw lots of, okay. Sunday is when I saw those red wings too. And I think we will continue to see them for another maybe couple of weeks. So I always associate those noisy flocks with November. It's fun too to look if you can get your eyes on the birds, and once the leaves come off of the trees, it'll be a little bit easier. It's fun to look at those mixed, because they often are mixed flocks. You might hear the redwings, but then you start looking and you might see some cowbirds, but sometimes you'll see something really interesting, like say a rusty blackbird. It was always good to look at those flocks to see who all is in them. It might appear to be homogeneous, but if you look at the individuals, you might be able to pick out some other species that are migrating with the group. And Wallace has been keeping track of a lone turkey at Moose. Oh, I've heard about the Mooseheart turkey. It's all by its lonesome every day. Oh boy. Hopefully it doesn't make a bad decision there. That's an awfully big and busy intersection. But somebody else was talking about another lone turkey. I think we're at another juncture, another time of year when there's birds that are dispersing from other flocks. So yeah, hopefully that one will find some friends. But I've heard about that bird. It's almost got me wanting to drive over there just to see if I can get a glimpse of it. It's getting kind of a following there.
Early morning.
Every morning.
Oh, at sunrise, like when the sun comes up, you'll see.
And it's
by the pool.
Well, hopefully it'll find some friends.
Yeah.
Well, Mooseheart's an awfully big property there. You would think that there would be other turkeys attracted to that area. And are there plans on those rain gardens I could look at? You know what? I could ask about that, Meredith. It's been sort of a work. I know that what was spec'd to grow in those rain gardens didn't really grow. And there's been a couple different planting projects there. I can tell you there's quite a few sedges in the bowl, the deeper part of the bowl, and great angelica. But then as the slope comes up towards where the sidewalk level is, then it kind of transitions to prairie. We've got a lot of rattlesnake master and our coneflowers. Let's see what else is along there. Some milkweeds. Yeah, I could maybe get a plant list from you, but I know it. One holds more of the water than the other one does, so there's a difference, and I think one has more diversity than the other one. So I think whatever plans were laid out didn't really work. So our restoration crew has had a few volunteer work days where they've put plugs in of different things, trying to find that combination of plants that works best. But I think the bottom are sedges. I can find out the species for you.
We
And
just have like three or four rain garden projects going on this coming year, so I just am interested in that.
okay,
And they're actually close to your properties. We kind of run together, the
okay,
Master Gardeners and the St. Charles Park District.
okay. Yeah,
Okay.
let me see what I can find out on that for you.
Okay, thanks.
Cool. All right. Well, we've gone over. It is 9:08. Looks like we're through with the chats. Through with the slides. I think we're through for tonight. Oh, thanks, Sarah. Wild Ones has plans for rain gardens on their website, so maybe check that out too. In fact, I want to check Wild Ones website for and I don't know if that's the Start in Your Yard website. But yeah, I wanted to check for a friend who's having trouble growing it's got a lot of maple trees and he's not having any luck with grass growing there. So I wanted to check for some shade tolerant sedges and things like that. Everyone, thanks so much. Have a great rest of your week. And we'll be back again next Tuesday night with more good nature. So have a great night, everybody. Take
Thanks,
care.
Pam.
Pam, thank
Bye,
you, thank
everyone.
you.
Cheers.